Okay, Alice has joined me at what I affectionately like to call
the big table,
La Grande Table, which means it's time for our daily news. Got you there, didn't I? got to get up early, Alice. Let's take a look at what's making headlines around the world, shall we? Let's start with this. It's the South China Morning Post. It's reporting that Beijing will favour investors from ASEAN countries as part of the bilateral free trade agreement. That ASEAN summit's been taking place at the moment. It's also pledging $20 billion to fight poverty across Southeast Asia.
The Moscow Times is suggesting that the world faces a nuclear disaster as sunken Soviet ships decay off Russia's northern coast. It quotes a Norwegian watchdog warning of an Arctic underwater Chernobyl.
Cheery.
Scary
In the
stuff.
business section of the International New York Times, there is this, the internet's biggest video site, YouTube. It's launching a new pay monthly music service.
And in the Daily Telegraph business section, billionaire investor Warren Buffett backs out of Procter & Gamble to buy battery company Duracell for $4.7 billion.
There's more on that brilliant story about the first ever Comet landing in the Japan Times. I love that as a space fan.
Didn't know that.
Well, there are concerns a probe could run out of power. No. European scientists are putting on a brave face.
Now, Rajesh, is doggy bagging your restaurant leftovers becoming more acceptable?
Is that a euphemism? Hope not.
Oh, the International New York Times is suggesting that it is. It says that French restaurants are jumping on the trend, encouraged by a growing consciousness about food waste.
As opposed to their own wastes. Yeah. Well, joining us is Cornelia Meyer, the CEO of MRL Corporation, a business consultancy. Cornelia, love to have you back to go through some of the stories again. Let's start off with this story on the front page of the South China Morning Post. China offering a better deal for trade-pact investors, for ASEAN countries. So Southeast Asian countries are going to be laughing, but others will be.
It's not. I mean, there's this whole tussle with the US wants the Trans-Pacific agreement, the TPP. They have the Transatlantic agreement with the EU, the TAP that they're currently working on, and they're working on the TPP, but they have excluded China from the TPP. So China says, well, we're somebody too, so let us talk to our mates and let us make it sweet to them. And if you look at it, for ASEAN, this is a 10-country economic union. $44 billion was the trade last year with China.
440.
Sorry, 440 billion. Yes, exactly. And their biggest trading partner is China. So this is attractive. What worries me is, shouldn't we rather be talking about the WTO and try to make the Doha round go well? Because shouldn't we opt for multilateralism rather than these free trade zones between blocks of countries? Because we're fragmenting the trade of the world if we have these trade blocks rather than a multilateral, all-encompassing WTO agreement.
But, I mean, by trying to get a multilateral agreement, then you just got to get everyone to agree, which is proving very, very hard.
Yeah, well,
it's impossible to do.
It's very hard to do, but that's really what we should aim for. And I hope that these bilateral agreements will get enough consensus amongst these, amongst these institutions or these gatherings of countries that one can then take it back up to the WTO level.
What is interesting, though, is that China is opening up itself, isn't it, in that it's allowing these outside nations, albeit within their own neighbourhood, to invest in an increasing number of industries inside China. They're opening up this so-called negative list.
Which is very good, but on one hand, on the other hand, they have to give something, because the ASEAN countries are all in this TPP of the US. So if China wants another agreement, it has to give these countries and say, look, we're giving you something extra. Come to us. Don't go to the TPP.
Now let's talk about something a little bit scarier, shall we? A Arctic underwater Chernobyl bubbling away off Russia's northern coast. How worried should we be about this? The thought of sort of rusty nuclear tankers rusting away.
We should be very worried because we have 17,000 containers, 19 submarines and 14 nuclear reactors of submarines rusting away merrily, sort of in the Barents Sea. And we should be worried, but let's not be sort of too condemning to Russia. in the 70s, everybody did this. And this are remnants of the 70s. So the US did it, everybody did it, but one needs to do something because this is scary stuff.
But they then stopped doing it, and Russia continued to do it up until 1991 in much larger volumes than anyone else.
Yeah, they continued doing it, and one needs to again, that's something where probably all the countries in the Baltics and in the Arctic need to get together and say, how can we clear this up, because this is dangerous stuff.
Very evocative language being used by the Moscow Times. A toxic boneyard.
That is, yeah, that's quite a phrase, yeah. And interesting that it's in the Moscow Times.
Yeah. That's what I want to say. It's interesting.
Paper.
So it's a Russian paper, so there's clearly consciousness because if you live in St. Petersburg, you won't like this.
For sure, yeah. OK, let's move on to the International New York Times, the business section. This is an interesting story that we first heard about on Thursday. YouTube starting to charge for premium music content. So, you know, you've been able to get it for free so far, or ad-funded for some, you know, YouTube channels. Now you can pay for it, which is a rival to other streaming services like Spotify and Beats.
I think it's very good. It's the right direction. If you look, the artists need to get some revenue. Yes, you said YouTube shared some of the ad revenue, but a very, very small percentage. And if you look at it, I think the sales of CDs were down something like 14% year on year last year. So where, if you're an artist, artists should get paid too. Yeah. So if you're an artist, where do you get paid if all your music is there free in the open domain? So I think this is the right way to go.
But also for YouTube, I mean, Google's been very, very reticent to talk about how much money YouTube is making. I wonder if this is also a way to redress that and sort of come out and make some profit for a change.
Maybe that's part of it, but I think the main thing is that you had quite a few artists who became recently rather vocal, saying, look guys, you're streaming us and you're not paying. This is not fair. This is like going to your local bakery saying, I'll have that loaf of bread, but gee, you know, I'm not paying you.
Yeah, you wonder if it was always inevitable, don't you? Now, the sage of Omaha, Warren Buffett, he just continues to make headlines, doesn't he? Whatever he does, we want to know about it. And should P&G be worried that he's choosing to own Duracell, formerly owned by P&G, rather than P&G in this sort of swap that he's got involved in?
I think not. This works very much with P&G's strategy. P&G wants to focus on household and personal care products. Duracell doesn't make... P&G over the last decade went out on a rampant, you know, spending spree, buying up all sorts of, you know, companies, and now that it's really a mixed bag, and it's a good thing to focus. You know, this fast-moving consumer goods space is a tough space with razor-thin margins, so they do need to focus.
Interesting.
Talking of space.
Very clever.
Let's let you talk about this one, Roger.
Japan Times, one of many, many papers that are talking about the best story of the last couple of days, frankly. This plucky little probe that bounced off the surface of this comet, then finally landed there again. It's like WALL-E. It's like the film WALL-E.
I have to tell you, I prefer the G20 story, but as you're so adamant about it, I'm an economist, I can't help it. But as you're so adamant about it, isn't it a fantastic achievement to land this craft on this teeny tiny little comet? And as somebody said, I mean, they've really learned in the last years doing this so much more about space than in many of the bigger missions.
And that's, I think, what has really caught the imagination of viewers all over the world.
And I mean, I'm going now into the movie space, but think of a comet wanting to hit Earth. Maybe it's good one can sort of do something and land.
Calm down, Cornelia, calm down. OK, let's finish with a happy story so we don't have that doom-laden scenario. This story about doggy bags. French people don't really have doggy bags. They don't take food home from restaurants.
Madness.
I know.
Such a good idea.
In America, you get giant portions and you go home with another meal.
Well, there's two things. One, it's good, waste not, want not. It's very good to have
Do you like doggy bags, Cornelia?
It's good to do that. Thank you, very good.
Doggy bag. This is ginger banana cake made by our director, Jenny.
Oh, thank you so much.
Cornelia Meyer. That story was just a reason to give you that, frankly. Cornelia Meyer, we're going to have to leave it there. Always very nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming in and going through some of the papers with us. Alice and I will be back again in a few minutes' time.
See you soon.
It smells delicious, actually.
Thank you.